morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice Radio. So today, it is time to look at how Trevenant is still the king, just so long as Wally is legal. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I did bring you news recently of a lovely little tournament held over in Japan, whereby it was an expanded tournament, but it was an expanded extra tournament. That is to say that they unbanned some cards. Basically, it was Getsis and Wally. Oh, and Hex Maniac. They also unbanned Hex Maniac. And it was a large enough tournament, and etc, etc, etc. Turns out, Trevenant still the best. Now, I did bring you the other day some news just about what the top cut looked like, but I thought it was only fair at this stage, since the lovely 2new1223 has shared it over on Twitter, to bring you the winning Trevenant deck list. And it should come as no surprise to anybody that it revolves around Trevenant. It's a Trevenant deck. But what's kind of cool here is that there are some newer tricks which have come out in the last few sets, which actually make it a significantly better deck. Or at least a slightly better deck. So what we see here is Trevenant. When it's in the active, your opponent cannot play any item cards. That's very significant, especially with Wally, because Wally means you can go first, play a Wally, and then your opponent doesn't have any items for the entire game. Now, it's only when it's active, so your opponent could use something like a Guzma to bring a non-Trevenant off your bench, but even if they do, that's their one supporter for the turn, and if you can just have a Trevenant active and a couple on your bench, there's nothing they can do. Even if you don't get the turn 1 Wally, if you go second, you got Phantom here with Ascension, so a single energy, and then as your attack, you search your deck for a Trevenant and evolve it up, so you guarantee that if you go second, you've got that Trevenant at the end of your turn. And then we've got Dimension Valley, just in case you don't have the energy for Phantom. Yeah, you're getting the Phantom here, ladies and gentlemen, and you're getting the Trevenant, you're getting that ability lock. And then you evolve it into Trevenant Break, and the cool thing about Trevenant Break here is that for 1 energy, as long as you've got a Dimension Valley on the field, you put 3 damage on each of your opponent's Pokemon. That's pretty ridiculously good. You just sit there, spread damage around, hopefully you've been blocking items for the entire game, maybe if you went second. Maybe if you went second, your opponent only has a single turn, so hopefully there's not too much they can do during that time. Okay, so that's essentially the basics. And you only really want to be using Trevenant most of the time. But this deck does play a few other cards here, and a few very relevant cards. What we see here, weirdly, is 1 copy of Necrozma GX. Now, what's awesome about Necrozma GX is it's a psychic Pokemon, so you can use Dimension Valley. So this deck actually plays some double colorless energy, and this is a great combo in Expanded, so that you can use Black Ray GX to do 100 damage to each EX and GX on the field for just a single energy attachment. That's pretty nice. Don't forget, of course, that Trevenant's attack is double colorless plus a psychic, so without a Dimension Valley, it is still kind of useful having a double colorless, but really Necrozma is where you get most of the love here. We see 1 copy of Marshadow. Largely, it's here for the fact that you can let loose. You can force your opponent into a new hand of 4, and if you ability lock them while giving them a new hand of 4, that's kind of hilarious. We then see 1 Tapu Lele, and Tapu Lele here, we are playing the psychic version. As I always say when we look at this, there is a psychic version, there is a fairy version. The huge difference here is that the fairy version can be grabbed with Mysterious Treasure. Every other Pokemon, other than the one we're going to talk about next, can be grabbed with Mysterious Treasure. That's why you play the psychic version. But it's actually more than that, because the good attack here, Magical Swap, move any number of damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon around. With a Dimension Valley in play, that's for a single psychic energy. And of course, with Trevenant Break, you're sitting there spreading energy round, so you end up in a great situation here, where you spread around with Trevenant Break turn after turn after turn, and then Tapu Lele for a single psychic energy on a basic Pokemon can be dropped as a complete surprise and move them round. This is Trevenant the way it's always been. And we've had Necrozma for a while, but just adding in cards like Marshadow can really help here, especially given that you've got the item lock. And then, of course, you add in Tapu Lele with its ridiculous attack, and it gets, to be a little bit blunt, ridiculous. We also have a couple of Tapu Lele GX here. Quite simply, it's so you can search out your turn 1 Wally. There's other uses, there's other supporters. It's generally for your Wally here. In terms of energy, we've got the double colourless as we previously mentioned, but we also see mystery energy here. This is really, really good. It reduces your attack cost of psychic Pokemon by 2 colourless energy, which means that Trevenant, it's still not free retreat, but you attach a mystery energy, the retreat goes down to 1, and you can pay that using mystery energy, and then you are up and rolling and good to go. That's pretty sweet. And then there's just some basic psychic energy because, you need psychic energy to be honest with you. Now, in terms of the supporter line here, we can afford to play lots and lots of weird and different supporters and all of that, because you've got Tapu Lele, and to be frank, you've got time here. Now, obviously, you're playing a couple of Cynthia. They are the best supporter cards in the format. Obviously, you are playing a couple of N to disrupt your opponent. Yes, Marshadow can disrupt your opponent, and yes, Marshadow can be grabbed with a mysterious treasure, but N is still the king of disruption here. We see free Professor Juniper because it's a very aggressive supporter card. That is absolutely needed. And then we see a bunch of one-offs. Other than 2 Guzma. Obviously, you're playing 2 Guzma here, because Guzma's phenomenal, especially when you're blocking item cards. That means no Float Stone, no Switch, etc. So actually here, if you can strand a Pokemon in the active, and then keep using Trevenant Break to be silent fearing for free damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon, if you can strand something in the active and start using Silent Fear, it is frankly phenomenal. And then we see a bunch of one-off supporter cards. We see 1 copy of Wally. There's going to be games where it's prized, because as much as I make a big deal about Wally, and Wally is good, you can win without Wally here, ladies and gentlemen. Wally's pretty gosh darn good. We see 1 copy of Colrus, lets you shuffle your hand into your deck and draw a number of cards equal to the total number of bench Pokemon of both players. I mean, look, if your opponent fills up your bench, and let's not forget a bunch of decks are playing Skyfield, yeah, that's ridiculous. 1 copy of Getsis, it was unbanned in this format. You play it turn 1, get rid of all your opponent's items, draw 1 card for each item they shuffle back. Here's the thing though, when you're playing Trevenant, you're blocking items, so your opponent is going to build up a handful of items they're not allowed to play, then you drop Getsis, and you could be drawing like 15 cards in some games, which is a bit redonk. And then we see 1 copy of Faber. I know, right? I told you this deck had some new cards in. Faber lets you basically Lost Zone one of your opponent's tools or special energy, or a stadium in play. So it's just great disruption. I mean, if you're against a Zoroark deck, for instance, you can just keep using Faber to Lost Zone all their double colourless and then laugh in their face. But, be nice, usual rule. And I should mention at this stage, if you haven't guessed, it's an expanded deck. So you've got Versus Seeker to reuse any of these supporter cards as and when you like. In terms of other item cards, there really aren't very many. This is not an item-heavy deck. This is a slow deck. This is I've got a Trevenant, I'm probably going to win kind of deck. Now, we have 4 Mysterious Treasure, just so you can get your Pokemon on the first turn of the game. That's pretty important. And then we do see a couple of Enhanced Hammer to get rid of those special energy. Like I've said, stuff like Zoroark. You're weak to Zoroark. Zoroark's a problem. Go after their special energy. Oh yeah, speaking of which, we're playing weakness policy here. So actually, if you attach that to Trevenant, you're not weak to Zoroark. And it's not like your opponent can just field blower it away, but because they can't play any item cards. Yes, Zoroark is a problem for Trevenant decks, but between weakness policy and all of your special energy hate, you should be okay. Speaking of which, we do see a copy of Field Blower here, just to get rid of some tools and stadiums. We see a copy of Rescue Stretcher to recover your Pokemon, which is sometimes important. We see a Float Stone to give yourself free retreat. You've got Mystery Energy, it's not the end of the world, but it is nice to have. We see Super Rod to get either basic energy or Pokemon back. That's how you can get away with playing just a single copy of Rescue Stretcher. And quite obviously, our ace spec of choice here is Computer Search. Remember the rule. If you need to get set up, you play Computer Search so that you can search for whatever it is that you need. That's pretty gosh darned important. You might notice there's no Ultra Ball in this deck. But obviously, all of your Pokemon here are Psychic. So you're fine. I think I mistakenly said Tapu Lele GX wasn't Psychic earlier in the video. I'm not 100% sure, but I might have done. I'll put a note on the screen, or I will have done by the time you've seen this. Obviously, that's dumb. Clearly, it's a Psychic Pokemon. You don't need Ultra Ball. Mysterious Treasure's the same, but you only need to discard one card from your hand. And then obviously, I've mentioned Dimension Valley like 17 times. This is a good deck. It sets up. Having Wally and Getsis really helps, but don't sleep on the new cards. Things like Faber, things like Tapu Lele, things like Marshadow, they make this deck better. And what I love about this list is it goes, look, I know I suck against Zoroark, so I'll play Enhanced Hammer, I'll play Faber, and I'll play Weakness Policy. We're cool. If you go into Expanded and unban a couple of cards, Trevenant is still king. And I don't think there's any real argument against this. It's a ridiculously good deck. But I want to know what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Do you think having tournaments with these cards unbanned is fun? Or do you think it's a bit too far? Do you think Trevenant's great? Or am I overselling it? Go nuts, ladies and gentlemen. But please do remember the rule. Be nice, would you? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at The Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays. We're taking a big look at Transformers. We've started diving into Keyforge. It's awesome. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.